Good evening. This is the Paso Robles Planning Commission for April 12, 2022. I need to read this preamble. The city has returned to a hybrid public meetings pursuant to AB 361, which allows for a deviation from the teleconferencing rules required by the Ralph M. Brown Act. Residents now have the option to attend the meeting in person or to participate remotely. If maximum occupancy is met in the council chambers, additional attendees will be asked to participate in the meeting via remote options listed below. To participate remotely, residents can live stream the meeting at www.prcity.com/YouTube and call 805-865-7276 to provide public comment via phone. The phone line will be open just prior to the start of the meeting and remain open throughout the meeting to ensure the opportunity for the public to comment on each item heard by the commission. Written public comments can be submitted via email to planning@prcity.com. Those received prior to 12 noon on the day of the meeting to be posted to the city's website as an addendum to the agenda. If submitting written comments in advance of the meeting, please note the agenda item by number or name. Planning Commission meetings will be live streamed during the meeting and available to play later on YouTube by accessing the following link, www.prcity.com/YouTube. So at this point, I will call the meeting to order. We'll all stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. Joel, would you like to lead us in that?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Item C, roll call.
Commissioner Christensen. Commissioner Covarrubias.
Here.
Commissioner Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Gibson.
Here.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
Here.
Commissioner Neal.
Here.
Chairperson Kogler. The record will reflect that Christensen and Kogler are absent and Commissioner Gibson is the acting chair.
Thank you. Can we have staff introductions, please?
Yes, Warren Frace, Community Development Director.
Marcy Reynoso and Ashley Peterson, Administrative Assistant.
Darcy Delgado, Associate Planner.
And do we have anybody else joining us via remote?
Isaac Rosen
City Attorney.
is our Deputy City Attorney. He's on the line.
Okay, thank you very much. Item number E, general public comments regarding matters not on the agenda. Is anybody from the general public that'd like to make a comment about a matter not on the agenda?
There are no callers.
Okay, thank you. Item number F, agenda items proposed to be tabled or rescheduled. Are there any of those items?
There are none.
Okay, moving along. Section G, public hearings. First hearing is a site plan review for the use of the alternative material for the River Lodge Motel parking lot, P21-0072/SPR 21-12. This is a public hearing. Could we have a staff report on this, please?
Perfect. All right. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. Darcy Delgado, Associate Planner. As mentioned, this is a site plan review for the River Lodge Motel. So the existing River Lodge Motel is located on Theater Drive at Alexa Court. It's in the southern portion of the city limits. It's across from the Crossings Shopping Center, which has the major big box store Target. The site is just over 2 acres in size. It has a general plan land use designation of regional commercial, and it's also within the commercial highway plan development overlay zoning district. So the current owner is remodeling the River Lodge Motel and has submitted for a site plan review for the exterior remodel, which includes new colors and materials. They've also redesigned their common areas. So there's an updated pool and jacuzzi area. They have a new outdoor bar and barbecue area with like a pizza oven. Also, they have a new 8-foot tall perimeter wall, which it fronts along Alexa Court there, closer to the freeway. They totally redesigned the landscaping. They are working on restoration of their historic sign, which still needs to go through kind of a separate process, but DRC did have a glimpse at that when we did meet. And then, of course, the reconfigured parking lot is kind of part of that reconfiguration of the common areas. So most of the proposed remodel has already been reviewed and approved by the Development Review Committee, which has the authority to approve those architectural changes to the motel facade, as well as the colors and materials, the landscaping, the fencing, and the overall reconfiguration of the common area, since they did reorient where parking is in relation to the motel itself. So as part of the application for the remodel, the project or the property owner is also requesting an alternative parking lot material to be approved, and that would accommodate the motor lodge redesign. So instead of traditional concrete or asphalt, the project would use what's called an NDS permeable paver system, which is essentially a gravel material compacted into a paver grid. So I've included a photo on the right of the screen to show you kind of a close-up of what that could look like. As opposed to on the left, you have a rendering of what the applicant has provided. So it's a little bit less detail in that rendering. So typically, a permanent paving system would be required for any commercial parking lot, but an exception to this requirement can be approved by the Planning Commission. And so in accordance with the Paso Robles Municipal Code, section 21.22.080, subitem 3, an exception may be approved by the Planning Commission to allow non-permanent parking lot materials, such as decomposed granite or other suitable materials on a case-by-case basis for uses such as interim overflow parking lots or very low-intensity agricultural or rural-oriented land uses, or for parking spaces in a rear yard residential use if it's in addition to primary parking spaces. So in terms of reviewing this exception request, the main concern by staff was to prevent tracking out of that gravel material onto city streets. And so in working with the city engineer, the applicant has designed the project so that the main entrance to the parking lot, which is identified in that red circle there, will have a concrete front drive approach, and that's intended to minimize that track out. They also have a secondary access. This is for emergency use only, and it will have removable bollards. So it doesn't have the deep concrete drive approach like the primary entrance, but it will only be used for emergencies, and so we're not anticipating this to need any further redesign. I'll also point out that as part of the DRC's review, when this project initially went to the Development Review Committee, there was a concern on how the parking lot stalls would be striped so that there was some permanency to that. And so to address the concern, staff has added a condition of approval that would require a permanent striping system, such as using a gravel delineator marker. However, another method may be suitable here, and so a gravel delineator marker would just kind of fit right into the grid, that paver grid, and it would provide some permanency. So as mentioned, allowing an exception to using permanent parking lot materials can be approved by the Planning Commission, and so staff has prepared some findings for this exception. These are summary versions of the findings, but the full version can be found in Draft Resolution A. So first, the subject site is physically suitable for the type and intensity of the proposed use, and as designed will meet the project's minimum parking requirements. Second, the parking lot material exception will not adversely impact surrounding properties. The River Lodge has been vacant and a blight on the neighborhood for many years, and so the proposed improvements have a vintage mid-century modern aesthetic look to it, and it has an intimate setting enclosed by a screening wall, so that NDS paver system is visually appropriate for this high-quality remodel of a modest-sized motel. And then third, the parking lot material exception would be suitable at this location based on the design of the parking lot showing a permanent pavement system at the two entrance points to the parking lot, which prevents track out of gravel onto the city's right-of-way. And then further, the appearance of the gravel material is consistent with historic vintage roadside motel character of the project. So it will be up to the Planning Commission to discuss the request for the use of the non-permanent material and determine whether it is appropriate for this motel remodel project. So the options before you tonight are to, one, approve the draft resolution, which would approve the use of the NDS paver system, which is, again, a non-permanent paving system. Option 2 is to amend the above listed action. Option 3 is to refer this back to staff or to DRC for additional analysis. And lastly, option 4 would be to make findings to deny the application. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Is the applicant present with us, either, obviously not in person, as an applicant present online? Would they like to make a presentation?
We do have Tom Jess with Eris Studios, who should be joining us remotely.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, this is Tom Jess. Is it possible to make me the presenter so I can share my screen?
Yeah, give me just a moment.
Okay.
Try it now, Tom.
Okay. Try one.
Is it working, Tom? We don't see it yet.
Okay. I don't think it's going to be able to share for some reason. Dana, I think Dana in our office, Dana DiMolenta, has it on her screen as well. Maybe she can become the presenter.
Dana is a presenter now.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Looks like we're able to see her screen. So thank you for hearing us tonight. I'm Tom Jess with Eris Studio Architects, and I'm representing the owners of the project, which are Mike Kyle and Kimberly Walker. And I know today's discussion is really just about the paver system, but I thought it'd be helpful to give just an overview of the project goals, and what we're hoping to accomplish here. Dana, can you go to the next screen, please? The next slide. Actually, do you have the presentation slide? Okay, perfect. That's fine. So, next one. Okay, perfect. So Mike and Kimberly, this is something that they do quite a bit of in this area. They are the proprietors and have done renovations on a few other hotels you might be familiar with. The Granada Hotel in San Luis Obispo, Hotel Yanez, which is in Solvang, and then the Skyview Motel in Los Alamos. These are all similar properties where they were kind of run down and not quite up to snuff, and they've gone through and renovated them. And the River Lodge is the next one that we're going to be working on. And next slide, please. So what's there now is your very traditional motel, where you come in, there's a lot of asphalt right up against the motel rooms, and the parking lots from the cars shine right into the guest rooms, basically. And then there's a small pool area for the guests. That's really the extent of the amenity spaces there. And obviously it's run down and has seen much better days than it's currently seen. But the bones are solid, and instead of tearing this down and building a big structure there, the vision and the goal is to renovate it and make a really nice resort style project here. If you can go to the next slide, please. So what we're proposing to do is take the drive aisle and the parking and move it as far away from the guest rooms as possible. So you can see that we've taken the drive aisle, moved it all the way out against Alexa Court, and put the cars so that the headlights are shining away from the guest rooms. And then that allowed us to create little private patios outside of each of the guest rooms so that the guest rooms have an indoor-outdoor feel to them. And then the main amenity space has grown exponentially. The much larger pool, put a pool bar and barbecue area out there. There's a pizza oven, a barbecue, a hot tub, and lots of little areas throughout for people to gather and mingle and try to create a type of a community while the guests are there. Much more of a resort feel. We've put together a few before and after photos or images of what we're proposing. Can you go to the next slide, please? So this is, as you first enter the project, you can see the amount of asphalt and then the motel sign. And that sign is really iconic and is an entry point as you're coming into Paso from the south. And we wanted to really build off of that. So if you can go to the next slide, you can see we're enhancing that sign and bringing it back to some of the former glory of it. Enhancing the landscape quite a bit, building quite a bit more landscape around there, and then fixing the building up. And you can see those little patio areas that we were just talking about outside of there. And next slide, please. This is the existing pool area. You can see it's just a small kidney-sized pool with a fence all the way around it. And the landscape is really run down, but there was more to it, I'm assuming, at one point. But if you can go to the next slide, you can see what we're proposing for the pool area, which is really, like I said, a resort-style pool. It's a large pool, has the bar area with seating opening up onto there, lounge seating around the perimeter between, adjacent to the bar area. There's a pizza oven and a barbecue under, a shaded canopy there, and just really enhancing the guest experience outside of their guest rooms in the common areas. If you go to the next slide, I think we have one of the, so this is what we were just talking about, where the motel and the parking butts right up against to it, and there's just lots of asphalt right up against the motel rooms. If you go to the one more slide, you can see what we're talking about doing here. By getting rid of that parking and moving it to the other side of the lot, we're able to create these little semi-private patio spaces out in front of the guest rooms, which you can see there, and there's landscaping, walkways as opposed to big fields of asphalt. And then over to the left, you can see a little snippet of it. But throughout the project, we're creating these little sitting areas that create little small gathering areas for 2 to 4 to 6 to 8 people to kind of sit around. In this case, a fire pit. Other areas, it's just landscaping. But those type of intimate moments are really important to the experience. Next slide, please. And so this is a diagram explaining what we're doing with the paving system. So initially, we were looking at this area and we moved it away from the buildings. But the other thing we wanted to do was really create a permeable surface so that the rainwater can drain through it. And that was encouraged by Public Works. And just in general, it's a good practice, a good environmentally friendly practice to have the water drain through. And in looking at the permeable options, the NDS pavered system really appealed to us because it has kind of a little bit more of a rural character, less asphalty. And so when we first proposed it to Public Works, we talked with Mr. Athey, and his concern was that that it just not drag out onto the public streets. So that's where we put in with the blue. You can see where we have concrete at the entrance there. And we've worked with him and made sure that that's adequately sized and appropriate for the application so that that'll keep all the gravel on our side. And then the handicap parking stalls are also concrete, as well as the area for the trash pickup so that the trash dumpsters and so forth are on concrete. But the remainder of it, it really enhances the look and feel of the space and also enhances the permeability and the water penetration into the soil. And then there was a question about the permanent striping, and the NDS paver system does have a marker system that's integral to their system just for that. And that's a condition, and we're fully on board with that. There's no argument or exceptions taken on ours. We're on board with that. If you can go to the next slide. So this is a close-up view of it. And it is a paver system. It's rated for the fire truck, so the fire department's reviewed this, and they're 100% on board with it. No issue there, so it can bear their weight. And this paver system can have multiple different topping systems. We're choosing to go with a gravel system, but you could put grass on it, but that seems like a maintenance issue. But anyway, it's a full integrated system. The only thing that makes it not permanent from the zoning code regulations is that it doesn't have a binder, meaning the rocks don't stick together. The rocks are loose within the grid system. Other than that, it meets all the other requirements, and that's what we're hoping that we can present to you and that you would find appropriate for this project. And I think if you go to the next slide, it'll wrap up our presentation. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of an overview of what we're proposing and why we're in front of you, which is the paver system. And we're happy to answer any questions. We do have the civil engineer and the owners are also on the call if there's specific questions that they might be better at answering than I am. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. At this point, I will ask my fellow commission members if they have questions for the staff or applicant, and we start off down at on my left. Commissioner Covarrubias, do you have any questions of staff or the applicant?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Just a question, I guess maybe even for Tom. What's the durability of this type of pavers?
It'll last 10 plus years. I think if areas that have a lot of traffic get worn down, they'll have to smooth the rocks over to that area. But there's nothing in there that's degradable. It's a permanent system minus the binder that would bind the gravel together.
So the chance of this type of material creating pockets in the ground or building up to certain points with all the travel, what I'm getting to is it going to create with traffic? Are you going to start to see lines in the pathways because of the traffic, or is it durable enough to stay and keep its shape? I guess is what I'm asking.
No, that's actually a really good question. Dana, can you go back one slide? So you will not see the grooves. This is a permanent system, and you can see it in that diagram up on the upper right. It has a compacted road base similar to you would do for asphalt. So it's not just going over native dirt. It's got a road base material, geomesh in there, and then the paver system on top of that. So it's fully traffic rated. I think it's 70,000 pounds or whatever the fire department said that they needed. We confirmed that with the manufacturer, and the installation, will be appropriate with the manufacturers. So it'll be a flat surface. It won't be grooved like you see sometimes with DG or dirt driveways.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess a question for Darcy too. When you brought up the exceptions, I noticed number 3 mentioned both access ways. They had to meet the concrete, but there's no concrete in the emergency one though, right? Isn't that what you alluded to?
Right. So I think there was a little bit of typo between one of the slides and then another slide. So it is just a minimal driveway approach. There's not an extended concrete apron because one is not needed since it is for emergency access only. So there's going to be bollards to prevent any cars from traveling. So the finding can still be made that the main entrance point has the appropriate concrete apron. The secondary access looks like just the sidewalk. So we're emergency only driveway with removable bollards with the 28 turning radius. So I think the finding can just be modified, and we can double check that in the resolution to make sure that it's referencing mostly the main entrance, which is the main concern.
Okay, perfect. No more other questions.
Okay. Commissioner Jorgensen?
Yes, thank you. I had that same question. I noticed that on our draft resolution, it says 2 entrance points, so that will have to get changed. Let's see, I had a couple of other questions. Tom, could you elaborate a little bit? I guess we don't have an image, but describe a little more. What is a parking delineator mark? A permanent parking delineator marker within this system? I've used this system before. It works great. I'm fully in favor of it, but I've not seen that before. How does that work?
Dana, can you go back to the slide with the NDS pavers? Perfect. So you can see that these are laid down in a grid type pattern. So what it would be is it would be a piece of the system that would click into those octagons in a linear fashion on top of them instead of being rocks for that strip, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it's on top, so it's three-dimensional?
Correct.
It's, okay, so the parking delineator line, so to speak, would be raised above the gravel by just a little bit?
Correct, just slightly.
Yeah, okay,
Yes.
all right, that's good, thank you. Hang on, where's my, oh, thank you. My other question is for staff. What is the city's EV charging requirements for a project like this, or do we have any?
So we don't have any requirement that they provide EV chargers or charging stations, but we have seen over time that existing commercial uses are requesting them. So at this point, there's none proposed for this project, and we don't have a requirement for them to provide any.
I see that there's 2 Tesla chargers required as the owner of an electric vehicle that's not a Tesla. I hope there's more than that. Okay, thank you. I am so excited about this project. It's one of the best things I've seen come before us in a long time, and I'm enthusiastically in support of it.
Thank you. Commissioner Davis?
Yes, I'd like to tell Tom and the applicants and DRC that you have done a great job creating a very aesthetically appealing project. It's very exciting to see this. I know we're here talking tonight about the material for the driveway and the parking. And I had a similar question as Commissioner Covarrubias on durability. You know, I was doing my research, pros and cons. I'm assuming it's cheaper to do it this way, but will it land over time? And you're saying the maintenance, it's good for 10 years, because I really had a question on that. I had a question just like Commissioner Jorgensen on the demarcation of the parking spaces. So I'm going to ask something a little different. This might go to you, Tom. I could see this kind of motel with its vintage appeal being really popular with the car clubs that come to the Central Coast, and lots of Teslas driving around town, some nice cars with nice paint jobs. Would they be concerned about maybe kicking up some particulate matter from this type of parking area versus a paver? Versus asphalt. I'm a little concerned that people might think there's particulate matter. It might have dust, might chip the paint. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, no, I'll be completely honest with you. That's not something that I've thought about, but that is a totally viable option, that there could be car clubs coming here. I think that the car club people they would be aware of what type of paving system is there. I mean, I'm not sure exactly I'm not a car person myself, so I don't know how sensitive they are to that. But I do know that it's a gravel system. I know that in like the Concourse d'Elegance and where's that, in Pebble Beach, I've been there, and they drive on the grass and the gravel to get to there. But I don't know. I don't have a good answer to you there, to be honest.
I guess that's, a marketing question. I guess I will go to staff. Do we have anything like this in the city? I think this is different, whether it be a hotel or another business. I remember a particular parking material behind Golden Hill Auto, and it was quite controversial. But I think this is different. Do we have anything that we can compare it to?
So I'm not 100% familiar with the Vina Robles parking lot, but they have their overflow parking, and they have I think it's like a DG or some other type of non-permanent surface for their overflow parking, and then they have the asphalt for the main parking for the wine tasting. So it's not apples to apples with this project, but that is an example of a project that is in city limits that has used an alternative material for their parking.
But that's for supplemental, not for primary parking. And
Yes.
so anyway, that was something that had crossed my mind because I certainly want this project to be very, very popular. You know, as I look at some of the exceptions, and we can talk about this later when we're debating, but it's not interim, it's not overflow, it's not agricultural. So I'm trying to find a reason to support it. Anyway, those are my comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Neal?
I had the pleasure to be on DRC when this came forward, and it was not all roses and diamonds during that particular meeting. We did have the DRC did have a little bit of issue with the Quonset hut maintenance facility. So I think that's coming back to DRC for some review. But again, this is a great project. It does wonders for the entrance to the city. And just for Commissioner Davis, I've been on a back road to a winery in Paso Robles and saw a brand new Ferrari on a dirt road. So I think if folks are interested in coming to an area, they will take their exotics on the little off-road adventures. So I am in full support of this project and of the NDS payer system. So that's all. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Tom, I just have one question for you, and it occurred to me that, you know, if you have a concrete or a asphalt type of surface that when it comes to time of cleaning it, you know, whether it's leaf debris or some sort of litter or something, they would either sweep it up or blow it or something like that. How do you clean a surface like this?
You can actually blow it with the leaf blower on a lower setting. You know, you wouldn't do it full blast, and you can also rake it. I mean, it's no different than any other type of system. The rocks that are settled into the grooves aren't going to blow around. They don't move around, but you could blow it or rake it, either one to clean it.
Okay, thank you. So I'll ask my commissioners, do you have any other questions at this time? Mr. Covarrubias?
Just one more clarification, Tom. Just curious, now that we've been talking so much about it, when these rocks start to dissipate a little bit, just curious, if it started to get really windy as it's been here locally the last couple of days, is it going to create a lot of dust? I'm just curious. Do you know?
That is something that we did talk about, to be honest, with the civil engineer and the manufacturer. And it does not. The dust is because it's a finer particle, settles down to the bottom, any kind of that type of dust, and then the rock, which are the larger particles, are towards the top. So, and then if you did have to do periodic maintenance, like every few years or whatever, and replenish the rocks, the dust wouldn't be an issue. So dust is not a concern.
Okay, thank you for that. No other questions.
Are there any other commissioners have any questions? Okay. At this time, I'm going to open the public hearing. Are there any comments or questions from the public on this item?
I do see that Shannon Jessica has a hand raised on the Teams. If you'd like to go ahead and speak.
Hi there. Yeah, this is Shannon Jessica with Ashley and Vance, civil engineer. And I just wanted to speak to just the product being used in similar situations. We do have a couple case studies of hotels. There's one in New Orleans, a nicer hotel that uses this product in their parking lot, and there is a municipality in Dallas that used the product for their parking lot as well. So it is applicable to this application, and haven't heard from these agencies about any track out or problems with dust, but I can provide these case studies if required.
Is that the extent of your comments?
Yeah. It's been used for other hotels, and so yes, it's kind of past the point. I think Tom did a good job of covering the questions that were asked.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing that information. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to make a comment on this subject?
No other callers.
All right, thank you. See no other people that would like to make a comment, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the discussion of the Planning Commission. Does the Planning Commission have any discussion or comments? And I'll start on the other end. Commissioner Neal.
No comment. I'm ready to make a resolution.
Okay. Commissioner Davis?
Yep.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
I do have a couple of comments. I agree with Commissioner Davis's comment that this use is not one that is specifically mentioned in the ordinance. However, I would hope that this might be, if proven successful, this might be the incentive to expand that ordinance requirement for the future to allow in certain individually approved uses this type of system. It's sustainable through its permeability. I think it will provide a really interesting sensory experience when you pull off the freeway from your trip from wherever, or even just around town, onto this material, the sound, the crunch, the fact that you're going to slow way down and really enter a new environment. It just seems like not only is it visually interesting, but from a sensory experience in other ways as well. So my only comment is that I'm excited to see how this works. And like I said, I've specified a system like this in the past. It's been very successful, and I'm in support of it, even though I think we are making probably a technical exception to the existing ordinance.
Thank you. Commissioner Covarrubias?
Thank you, Field. Just a quick comment to Dave Athey. Appreciated your memorandum attachment 4 that's in here. That was helpful, very much so. I was curious to know if can we even do this? So that was very helpful. Having been a long time Paso Robles resident, moved here in 1980. I've seen this hotel for a long time, and I love this project. The first time I've seen it, if I'm being honest. I was not on DRC, so I think this is fantastic. So kudos to the owners for doing this.
Thank you. My comment on this is similar to my fellow commissioners. This site has been an eyesore for a long, long time, and it is the entrance to the city. So I'm very excited that somebody's taking this and moving forward with it. I think it's going to be a great improvement to that part of the city. I had similar questions in terms of reading the exceptions or the findings that we had to make, and I was going, man, we're going to have to maybe stretch this a little bit if we want this to happen. Because I agree with Commissioner Davis's comments that it doesn't seem like it exactly applies. But overall, I'm very excited about this project. So those would be my comments. So any other discussion from the commissioners, or I would entertain a motion?
I'd like to make a motion.
Commissioner Neal?
I'd like to move approval of draft resolution A, approving site plan review 21-12, approving the use of NDS paver system, a non-permanent paving system.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Discussion?
Yes, I'd like to ask the motion maker if he would be willing to add that the draft resolution needs to be modified from 2 entrance driveways to 1.
I accept that.
Maker, the motion is amenable to that. Is the second also amenable?
Yes.
I'm hearing an affirmative. Any other comments or discussion on this motion? Seeing none, have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Neal?
Aye.
Commissioner Covarrubias?
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Chairperson Gibson?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to the next item, item 2, City of Paso Robles General Plan Annual Report 2021.
All right. Moving right along. Again, Darcy Delgado, Associate Planner, for those listening online. So as you may recall from years past, this is a requirement of the state to report on the status of implementing the city's general plan. This status report is first considered by the Planning Commission before going to the City Council. So tonight you are being asked to make a recommendation on the general plan annual report, and City Council is expecting to see this 1 week from today. Once the City Council has reviewed the reports, we will be sending a follow-up report to the state that includes a very in-depth housing report of all the building permits that have been in progress for all of 2021. It's a very thorough report. So the general plan status report that you've been given tonight is broken into 2 sections. The first section is more or less a thumbnail analysis of where we are with the general plan elements and all of the different policies that it contains. The second part is a more detailed report on the status of the housing element. And so as I mentioned, we have, to go through every single permit, and that is something that goes to the state. So we really dive into housing quite a bit more than the rest of the elements. Also, our report does briefly mention the status of where we are with implementation of the Uptown Town Center specific plan. And that was just something that the City Council requested several years ago. So we've kind of carried forward by specifying kind of the activity that we see happening in the downtown area. So as part of the process of reporting on the general plan, all of the city departments were involved in updating various status action items pertaining specifically to their department. And as I said before, the Planning Commission is being asked to review this report and make that recommendation to City Council before the final version is forwarded to the state. So that'll happen later this month. So in the general plan, we have 240 policy action items, which do not include the housing element. Right now, we have 128 actions that are ongoing. So examples of these would be activities that were initiated a long time ago and are continuing, or just generally ongoing activities that occur during the course of everyday business with the community. We have 80 action items that are complete. These might be a specific task that would have been completed. 20 actions are in process, and then we have 12 actions that are not yet scheduled. So these might be things that have a budgetary limitation or another reason that they're just not on the front burner. So some fairly recent major general plan activities include updates to both the circulation element and the noise element, and those both occurred in 2019. And then in 2020, the city worked on updating its 6th cycle housing element, which has an 8-year planning period from 2021 through 2028. The housing element was adopted in December of 2020. One of the more notable programs that we've seen projects utilize out of the housing element is our fractional density program, and that encourages smaller units that are affordable by design. So just last year alone, there were 2 projects that used this program as far as entitlements, 2 projects that used this program and it increased what would have been 17 units to 35 multifamily residential units. So it's great to see that the program is being implemented. A further implementation of the housing element will occur with the comprehensive update to the zoning code, and so that's expected to be completed in the winter of 2023. So here's a snapshot of housing production that occurred in 2021. We had 32 units that received their certificate of occupancy, and the majority of these were ADUs or second units. And then if you look at the next line down, about half of the units that received certificates of occupancy came from the Uptown Town Center specific plan area. As for units under construction, we show there were 72 units, and then we saw substantial progress occurring within the River Oaks 2 subdivision, so that's why we see a big uptick in single-family units under construction. 128 units were entitled last year, and that included the 79 affordable senior housing units, which is part of the Riverwalk Terrace project located just west of JCPenney's in that Woodland Plaza 2 development. So this table shows the latest 6th cycle regional housing needs allocation, and so we also refer to that as the RHNA numbers, and this includes our progress so far in meeting the RHNA. So I've just kind of highlighted year 3, where we're at with this cycle. So under the new 6th cycle, which is from January 1st of 2019 to December 31st of 2028, which I understand is a different period than the housing element, so just bear in mind that they are 2 different periods. We were required to plan for 1,446 new dwelling units. Keeping in mind that we report on housing and try to hit the state requirements, but the city is not required or obligated to ensure that the number of dwelling units are built within this time frame. It's something that the private development community helps us with, and the city is only obligated to ensure that there is sufficient land appropriately zoned and served to accommodate these units. So we have 321 units that have been constructed to date when you tally up years 1 through 3, and so that's about 22% completion out of the 1,446. We still have a long ways to go. So to help move things along, to help the development of housing along and meeting our RHNA numbers, the City Council established the Housing Constraints and Opportunities Committee back in 2015, and they're otherwise known as the HCOC. And that group has been meeting regularly over the years, making substantial progress to reduce barriers to housing development. Some of their notable progress includes reducing development impact fees, reducing water and sewer connection fees, and then reducing traffic impact fees for infill residential. The HCOC's efforts resumed in 2021. They met 3 times during the year. So some of the topics discussed by the HCOC included further review of the boundaries of the Uptown Town Center specific plan, for the potential to expand the T-zones, as well as reviewing the city's progress on the comprehensive update to the zoning code. And then for the zoning code update, we're expecting the HCOC to continue to receive some updates on this to help facilitate discussions should there be any topics that affect housing policies and procedures for increasing housing production. So both the Beechwood specific plan and the Olson South Chandler Ranch specific plans were approved in 2020. The Beechwood plan consists of 952 housing units with an overall 234-acre master plan community, and that's on the east side of the city. The Olson South Chandler Ranch consists of 1,293 new residences, and that's on approximately 358 acres, also located on the eastern side of the city. And in terms of where we're at with both of those moving forward with housing production, it's expected that the Olson South Chandler Ranch will have an issued grading permit spring of this year, so very soon, and then with housing production to follow closely behind. And then with the Beechwood specific plan, they're still working on some of their tentative subdivision maps, and they are making progress moving into the next phase of housing development with that. So this is just a summary of progress, which is found at the end of our report. So out of the 240 general plan policy action items, again, not including the housing element, 95% are completed, ongoing, or are in the process of being completed. The city has the new 6th cycle RHNA assignment of the 1,446 residential units, and that's to be constructed between January of 2019 to December 31st of 2028. And so to date, there have been 321 units constructed, and as I said before, it's about 22% completion for our overall assignment of the RHNA numbers. And then as of December 31st, 2021, there were 32 completed residential units, 72 residences under construction, and then 95 residential permits either ready to pick up or that were already or still in plan check. Overall, housing development saw an increase in the number of residential units under construction from 2020 to 2021, and that represented about a 43% increase. So we also saw single-family residential units representing the majority of permit types, both in plan check and under construction, and so really we can attribute that to what's happening in the River Oaks 2 subdivision, as they're making a lot of progress. And then lastly, there were a total of 128 residential units that were entitled last year, and that includes the Riverwalk Terrace project, which again has the 79 affordable senior units, which will also be deed restricted. So that is everything I have for the general plan annual report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Darcy. Does the commission have any questions of staff?
Darcy, can you explain with this slide right here? So in this RENA cycle, we're at 22% units completed. What are the consequences if we don't reach the 100% in that time frame?
So it's a little bit misleading when we say we're 22% complete, because we also have income categories that we're trying to hit. So we do have objectives, measures to shoot for, but there's no obligation that we, those units get built. I think that, and maybe Warren might have a better answer on what the attaboy is from the state. I know that last cycle, for the 5th cycle, we had really reached our housing levels for the lower income categories, which not a lot of jurisdictions are able to do. I think it just makes the cities more eligible for grants, but I don't necessarily think that there's a consequence to not being able to meet
to reach that goal.
Yeah, there's no annual type of penalties or consequences. We're continuing to report back. As we get to the end of the 6th cycle and we get to the 7th cycle, it's possible that if our entire region, which would be the whole county, performed extremely poorly, that the HCD might adopt or require certain additional policies or requirements in the recertification process. So I think the real risk is if you don't make good progress here, that when you go back for recertification, you'll be subject to probably additional requirements to demonstrate that you're really trying to address the issue.
Later on. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other?
I got a question, Darcy, maybe for my own education. With regards to this RENA thing, how does Beechwood and Olson projects affect this?
So we show that let's see if we can go back to, let's see, so that's probably the best table. So, so we have different, in the staff report that you have, there are different tables that show, also they account for what's been entitled. And so although we have a sufficient number of above moderate units that have been entitled, they're not really reflected on this because we're looking at, what's being completed. So I think we just have to, it depends on what you're wanting to look at, what you're wanting to report on. So those projects are going to provide above moderate housing in the form of single family residences. We are able to also count ADUs to count them half towards low and half towards moderate income levels. We had a study that was done, which was we referenced in our housing element to justify that ADUs can be affordable. So we were able to break those up. So with the specific plans, because we're going to see ADUs, we will see some of those low and moderate income categories fulfilled as those start to take off and build. It's typically harder to get the extremely low, very low, and in even some cases the low to fulfill those in terms of our RENA numbers. But on the flip side, we're also seeing a lot of projects move forward, like the Riverwalk Terrace that was approved, and then we have the Sunrise Villas. So we are making substantial progress, and I think that with those specific plans, you'll just see, although more single family, you will see the ability to fulfill the ADUs, and there are multifamily types incorporated into those projects. So this table, as we move through this 6th cycle through the years, will start to fill up in each of these income categories. Got it.
And this allows also, just again for my own education, things like apartment units, because I know we have some affordable apartment units that are.
Right.
So that's included in this as well?
Right, yes. So this table is showing projects that have been constructed that have received a certificate of occupancy. So there is a table in the staff report that also shows projects that I believe in progress. So that means they haven't issued permit, maybe. So they haven't been completed, they haven't been constructed yet, or we have we have a project that's in the pipeline to get a building permit to start construction. So I think that it just depends on what you want to look at, but certainly multifamilies in there, single families in there, ADU, any residential unit that we can count is reported back to the state.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Roberta, do you have any questions? Mr. Neal?
Just a comment. So if I remember back on the HCOC during this process, if if we list a property on this year's or this cycle's housing or the housing element, and it doesn't get built, and we list it again, it is then becomes a by right development. So that's the caution, I think, for not just listing everything, because the by right sort of takes away any ability to plan a development, as I understand.
So we definitely were intentional in what sites were included in our housing element to meet our RENA. So we didn't need to actually use the specific plans to meet our goal. I'm not as savvy with as our Genevieve Shara is from MIG, who did our housing element and who's working on our update to the zoning code. But I know we have no net loss, and so if you do report or utilize a site for your housing element, identify it to reach your RENA, and if it's underdeveloped, or for instance, you have to account for those units. So if it ends up not getting developed in that cycle, I'm not quite sure, but there is no net loss. So we definitely want to account for any of those units we would have expected to be developed in this cycle. And I think it carries forward to the next cycle.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions myself. I think you might have just answered my first one, which is on page 55. I had noted that would seem to be a really a low number for me in terms of what is being reported. So did I hear you correctly that we list units at the time that they have been given a certificate of occupancy?
So on page 55, so we have a table that shows the housing production and entitlement activity for 2021. So this can be misleading because we're talking about reporting a permit that is in one specific stage. And so it is possible that we had more permits under construction, but maybe they moved on to getting their C of O. And so,
right.
so these numbers ebb and flow.
Yeah, let me clarify. So I think I had the same, I think I was on the same wavelength as Commissioner Covarrubias. So I think half of us or most of us attended the groundbreaking for the apartments on Creston Road, by Food for Less. That thought that was last year in 2021. So I was going, so wouldn't that be counted for 2021? Or at what point would you count a unit?
Right. So that was groundbreaking for the grading. I don't believe the building permit, if it's been issued, it'll count. We'll see it next year.
Okay.
So that's a 2020.
So is it at the time that a building permit is issued or a certificate of occupancy is issued, or at what point do we count that unit?
Right. So depending on where it's at when we are doing our annual report, if it'll be in one of those categories, but it is for that year. So being that groundbreaking ceremony occurred in the 2022, we won't report on it until next year.
Okay.
So those 200 units will likely be, probably be in a under construction status for next year's report.
All right. And so like where would that show up in these various charts? I mean, how is that counted?
So it is interesting to bring up because we don't really show the tables as they change each year.
Okay.
But certainly the 200 units would have been accounted for in the entitlements, which was in last year's report, and the entitled projects was with the specific plans over 2,000 units.
Okay. So, but just kind of carrying this process through, like we're trying to show the state that we're making progress. Mm-hmm. Like, so how does that work? So again, using that as an example, at what point do we say it's we've had these RENA numbers and we've accumulated these many units? At what point would that actually be on a chart for the cycle?
So I think if it is something that you're wanting to see, we can provide the table because there's so many different ways to report on it. Okay. So if you look at the housing report, which starts on page 90, you have table 3, which is progress towards meeting the RENA for permitted units. And then it should be table 4 on the next page, but it says table 3. We have completed units, okay, which is what I have on the screen. So if you want to look at, the permitted units for the last 3 years, it's quite a bit lower. We have 139 permitted units over the last 3 years.
Yeah, I was just trying to have an understanding, maybe even for my own benefit, as to if we're trying to satisfy HCD and hit RENA numbers. So how do they count? I mean, just kind of
So they're looking at all of the.
They look at all of the different permutations, however you slice it.
Right. So each year, when we fill out the very thorough report, we are literally every building permit that was either issued, applied for, or I could start with applied for. If it was applied for, issued, or completed, every single permit is tracked. And if they were issued or let's say applied for, issued, and received their C of O all in the same year, you'll have a linear progress on the chart to say that. And so they're asking more details about affordability, and we're breaking down what income level it's for. And so it's a very thorough report. And it is interesting to bring up because we've never included that in the past as for the Planning Commission or City Council. And we can certainly start doing that if you're wanting to see more information on each of these building, the permit activity.
Okay, so just to dive one more question in this area, and then I'll move on, and maybe Warren might want to jump in on this. Just again, piggybacking on fellow commissioner's comment or question. So I believe that I read in one of the trade magazines for the National Association for Home Builders that a couple weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, the LA County was found to be not in compliance. Is that correct?
I saw that.
And then if so, what's the consequence for something like that? Just again, you're finding out, like, are we in compliance? What would be the consequences? So that was a major news article. What was, they literally said that there was things in their plan that inhibited, for example, the development of apartments. So
right.
What's the consequence of that? Because that article that I read stated that it was almost going to be impossible for the county to actually meet the deadline by the end of the year.
They were going to have to zone for an insane amount of units, and they had only a certain amount of time, like 9 months or something, which was going to be impossible. So I think what I'm aware of is that penalties, if you're not able to provide, to zone for those units and to meet your RENA, that that your housing element won't get certified, you're ineligible for grant money, and so grants are very important these days. I'm sure there's other consequences that I'm not thinking of.
So the big issue, Southern California is all in the housing certification process like we were a year ago. So that's what you're hearing, is that they just don't think they're going to be able to meet what their allocation from the state was for the county. So the problem is, if you don't have a certified housing element, you are subject to legal challenge, and a big agency like LA County will get litigated, and they can go to court and say that without a certified housing element, this agency shouldn't be able to issue building permits, and they literally can shut an agency down with basically, a court order. And that's been a big risk with smaller cities, especially if you had a controversial project under CEQA. A lot of times the way to kind of slow down or stop a project, even if it wasn't a housing project, was to challenge the housing element. So it's a known method to stop an agency from issuing permits, is to claim that they don't have a certified housing element. So there's a huge legal jeopardy if you don't have that and you're challenged.
And at that point, Warren, would HCD step in and take over planning control for the county, or what would be?
Well, LA County is such a huge agency. That's basically like a political crisis that
I was literally
gets worked out in Sacramento fairly quickly, I imagine. And I think that's what this is that's why you're hearing about in the newspapers, is they're negotiating some sort of political settlement with the state at this point.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Go ahead, Joel.
If I remember right, there was also a bit of a penalty if you didn't get your element approved by HCD, that you'd have to go back every 4 years as opposed to every 8. So
yeah, there's all kinds of
that's a significant
landmines that they've built into the thing that just makes it that much harder. The reality is it is becoming more and more difficult to meet the state requirements, and honestly, we are very lucky that we got through when we did, because the state's increased the requirements significantly since our cycle went through.
Okay. Two other questions on page 88 under the parks. I know I was scanning through and I noted that it listed that conversion of Marie Bauer Elementary School site to a public park that provides educational facilities to the community. So I believe, I don't really follow the school district as closely as I used to, but I believe that is not happening as far as the school district is concerned. Is that something that should be changed?
So the one that's showing to be scheduled?
Yeah. The school board's voted not to close Marie Bauer and instead do a remodel of that site.
Yeah, so, and this one might need to take another look at it department-wise, if the city doesn't necessarily have the control over that.
Right. Okay.
It probably doesn't, it's
Just-
no
just a-
longer applicable to
or
be
maybe just
in
a
our
note,
element.
just like I said, I used to attend school board meetings all the time. Not so often anymore. Last question on page 104, B15. Again, this is more for my personal education, maybe on program 17, the fractional units. I find this to be interesting, and I know that we've had discussions and projects that come before us, but where did this actually come from, this formula? Is this a formula we adopted on our own, or is this a formula that we like, in essence, we saw another example that we liked? And the example that I would look at this is that a 2-bedroom unit is 1 unit as opposed to, you know, everything else being a fraction. Because I've seen 2-bedroom units that are smaller than 1,000 square feet even. I'm just kind of curious, where did that formula actually come from?
Yeah, so this formula was partly, you know, the idea for fractional density came out of an HCOC meeting. We had a member of the public mention that City of San Luis Obispo has this program that works quite well. So in working with HCOC, with MIG and staff, we were able to come up with this formula to try and address, you know, what a common form would be to make it so that if it was 2 bedrooms over 1,000 square feet, that it counted as 1 unit. So it was a little massaging of, I think, we've seen elsewhere, and then what made sense for City of Paso Robles.
Okay. All right, thank you. Are there any other questions from the commission for staff? Okay, I will go ahead and open this public hearing for this. So go ahead and open the public hearing on this. Or are there any comments or questions from anybody from the public?
There are no callers.
There are no callers. Okay, we'll go ahead and close public hearing. So one last time, any questions of staff? Okay, I will entertain a motion. Anyone?
I will make a motion. I would like to recommend approval, move to recommend approval of the 2021 General Plan Annual Report to the City Council.
Okay.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second by Commissioner Davis. Any other comments or discussion on the motion? See none. A roll call, please.
Commissioner Neal.
Aye.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
Aye.
Commissioner Covarrubias.
Aye.
Chairperson Gibson.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the next item of the section of the agenda, discussion items, consent calendar. Are there any comments or questions by any of my commissioners about the one item on the consent calendar, which is the Planning Commission minutes for March 22nd? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
This is Commissioner Covarrubias. I move to approve the Planning Commission meeting minutes from March 22nd, 2022.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
There is a second. Any discussion on the motion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Covarrubias.
Aye.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
Aye.
Commissioner Neal.
Aye.
Chairperson Gibson.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, moving on to the section of other reports, Paso Robles Streetscape Ad Hoc Committee report.
Yes, so we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow, which is Wednesday, the 13th, 11 a.m. That meeting will be in the large conference room in City Hall. There's also the ability to attend remotely. This will be the second meeting of the Streetscape Ad Hoc Committee.
And can you refresh our memory of who is on that ad hoc committee?
Yes, it is Kogler, Jorgensen, and Covarrubias.
Any questions? Okay, moving on to the next Housing Constraints and Opportunities Committee, HCOC Zoning Code Update Report.
Yes, so for the, so we do not have any scheduled meetings with the HCOC. So in terms of zoning code update, MIG is still working on the first batch of revisions for the zoning code. And so once those are ready for staff's review, we'll massage those a bit more. And at some point, we will be looking to bring a batch to Planning Commission and have like a study session. Not quite sure yet if we're going to do the same for HCOC.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, staff?
I do have a question. Darcy, will that committee be working on the expanding the T3 zone?
Right. So last time we met with the HCOC, we had talked about the expansion of the boundary, and so the direction that we received was that this, is ready to go to City Council. So the next step we have is to prepare a report asking the City Council to direct staff to pursue this as a formal amendment, and so then we would have to go through that public hearing process.
That process separately,
Right.
But the committee is discussing that.
So yeah, I think we're done probably with the committee at this point. It's just really moving on to receiving direction from City Council to pursue it.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission? No, seeing none. Item number 6, Development Review Committee rotation schedule. Or the commissioners have any conflicts or times that they cannot attend that they need help on? Yep.
I am on the May rotation, and probably either the first or second Monday of May, I will not be able to attend, but I can't say exactly. So perhaps if someone might be available, I could let them know.
We like on standby?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Well, I am already on the May rotation,
Yeah.
so it'd have to be somebody else.
I can
Anyone
give
else like to do
standby
that?
or Worrell.
Okay, standby. We have,
I believe I can get back up.
okay,
Great.
awesome.
Thank you.
So we have
I'll let you know as soon as I.
two planning commissioners, Commissioner Neal and Commissioner Davis can act as standby, so staff can make a note in case Commissioner Jorgensen lets us know that she can't make it. So, all right. Moving on to Section J, Planning Commissioner comments. I'll start off to my right, Commissioner Neal.
No comments this evening, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Davis.
I don't have any this evening. No questions, no comments.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
None tonight.
Okay. Commissioner Cover.
I will continue that trend. No comments.
I'm just going to have one. I'm thrilled that something's finally happening with the first item on our agenda. It's been an eyesore for so long. I was wondering if anything was ever going to happen. So, staff comments.
Yeah, update on a couple items for you. First of all, next meeting, we expect to have the short-term rental ordinance back on your agenda. That ordinance is scheduled to expire in August. So we need to either refresh it or make some changes to the expiration date. It's part of the zoning code, so a recommendation from the Planning Commission to the City Council is required. So we're getting notices ready on that. We do expect quite a turnout for that meeting. We printed out maps, which are those rolled maps on the dais. So that shows the location of all commissioner and council ownership properties, and then the dots show the location of permitted short-term rentals. The council asked for that just so they kind of had an idea of the distribution as well as where there might be potential conflicts. As you recall, last time we heard this item, there was a determination that if a commissioner lived within 500 feet of a short-term rental, there was a conflict of interest, which resulted in conflicting out almost all of the Planning Commission, which then required us to draw straws to select who was able to hear and vote. We may have to do that again. We're still waiting for the city attorney to make a determination on that issue. We should know that by the end of this week. So just be aware, this will be on your agenda. We may have a number of conflict issues that we'll have to resolve at the beginning of the meeting. Kind of makes for an exciting process to start a controversial issue. So just kind of be mentally prepared for that. This map's just informational. If you want to drive around, kind of see where the clusters and concentrations of short-term rentals are.
Okay, thank you.
Next one, Olson specific plan. We have a amendment to one of the development plans that should also be on your next agenda. As Darcy mentioned, that project's really close to starting construction. Sounds like they'll be breaking ground in the next couple weeks on that project. There'll be a formal groundbreaking event with the commission and council. Likely that'll be in early May. But you'll start to see some big activity happening out there, which then brings us to our permit activity forecast that we've been working on. Let's see, let's zoom in here a little bit. So I think this actually kind of fits in with our discussion on housing units and what we're reporting and what's going to be coming down in the near future. So this is the number of housing units over the last 35 years, basically. So the yellow line would be the single-family units. The brown line is multifamily units, and the purple line is the combination of both together. So you'll see back in the late 90s, early 2000s, we were building a lot of single-family houses. The majority of the houses in the county were built in Paso Robles during that time. So you'll see that we were building, almost 600 units a year some of these years, kind of averaging about 500 units a year for about 5 years straight. Then the recession hit, and it basically bottomed out. And it's really been fairly flat ever since, especially if you look at single-family production. Has never gotten over 100 units since 2006. Where we see the peaks, those have been actually multifamily, which is good. The Oak Park project is accounts for most of these peaks. But for the last couple of years, although we've been approving a lot of projects, we just haven't seen those units built yet. So you'll see these last 3 years have been relatively low in production numbers for both multifamily and single family. We expect that trend to reverse significantly starting later this year. So our projection is for single family permits that we'll have permits for River Oaks. Valley Community Homes will be starting construction in part of the Beechwood project. Shea Homes is likely going to be the major builder at Olson, along with STG and KHOV. And then there's the Fuentes project. Between all those builders, which will all be building at the same time, we could see annual production rates just for single family approaching 450 units a year. In addition, multifamily, we have that Redtail project that we brought up. So the way those things work, as Darcy said, the groundbreaking was for the grading permit. The actual issuance of the building permits is divided between 10 different structures. So each one of those gets issued at a different point. So we'll start to see those buildings actually get built and finalized in the next 2 years. So that's 200 units. There's a apartment complex that Paso Robles Housing Authority is going to do in the Olson project, 80 units. There's a Riverwalk Terrace, another 80 units. We've got the ADUs that are mixed into just the general city as well as the specific plans. That could be up to 100 units annually. And then just background infill apartments that are already approved, probably another 50 units. So there you're back to 250 units a year. So potentially you could see up to maybe 800 units a year at a peak if all these projects come together at the same time. So we're starting to gear up and start to looking at staffing requirements to accommodate this. But we do see, some significant changes and trends, and that should be really good for the community in terms of affordable housing and hopefully getting housing prices more in line with what some of the community needs are. Some other things we've been projecting. Also commercial and industrial we've been looking at. So this chart is looking at hotel rooms. So hotels just go in peaks and valleys. So we haven't built any hotels for the last couple of years, but this year it looks like Hotel Ava is going to start back up along with Residence Inn. So potentially we're looking at 300 rooms in the next year. And then after that, we have the Fairfield Inn and the Hyatt Place that potentially come online. So potentially 500 new hotel rooms in the next 2 to 3 years. And then in terms of industrial development, which is your red line, we've been averaging about 200,000 square feet a year. If you look at that, we expect that to go up to probably about 500,000, if not more, annually. So you got Justin Winery, you got the Majestic project potentially, Stravinsky, the Commons. These are still in the entitlement process, but as those come online, potentially you see a large spike in commercial industrial square footage coming along at the same time. So that's just kind of our forecast in terms of trends, what we see coming down the pipeline. So we thought that'd be just good information to share with the Planning Commission. And with that, Darcy, anything else?
I have one more thing. Just to keep on your radar, if you want to plug into your calendar, the planning commissioners are required to do ethics training. So unfortunately, the presentation that Isaac gave us back in about the Brown Act was not enough ethics training. So August 1st and 2nd, there are, so Monday and Tuesday. Monday, the time slot is between from 2 to 4 p.m. And then on Tuesday, it's from 10 a.m. to noon. So it is a bit in advance, but if you want to write that down, I'm going to be sending out an email. So just keep it on your radar that you're required to do ethics training. It will be held in person this year.
We certainly get our opportunity to do lots of training. I think I just did the, what was it, a cyber one that we had to just do?
Cyber training, yes.
Cyber training. Warren, could you do us a favor? Please send those slides to the commission, the ones
Certainly.
you just did.
Yeah.
I find those very interesting. Thank you. Any other staff have comments? No, looks like everybody has departed. At this point, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
You guys are so shy today.
I just couldn't get to the button, it's my hand, but I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Good evening.